This is the Hyundai Kona N, a car we're familiar with during our time sending it around Atlanta Motorsports Park earlier this year. It was surprisingly at home on the track, but now we've spent a week with it on public roads, and here's what we thought. The good news is we've been all over the Hyundai N lineup. We've done the Veloster N on street and on track. We've done the Elantra N on street and on track. And we've done this Kona N mostly on the track, and now we've had a chance to spend a week with it on the street. So we're very familiar with what's going on here, but if you've missed those videos, here are the highlights of what's going on under the skin. Under the hood, you've got the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder from the N division, making 276 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque. But all Kona Ns are DCT equipped, which means they get NGS, which will bump up your power output to 286 horsepower for 20 seconds. I mean, from an engine and power perspective, you've got plenty of grunt. It's got plenty of torque, it revs, it feels sharp, and it wants to go fast. Does 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, and that's saying quite a bit for something under 35 grand. But did we mention the DCT, which is probably my favorite DCT south of Porsche's PDK. Again, it's amazing to consider you get such a finely tuned gearbox for such a little money. One of the places that you save money, and importantly weight, is in the driveline. Performance-wise, this kind of splits the difference between something like a GTI and a Golf R, but the Kona remains front-wheel drive, much like the GTI. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, 286 horsepower and 289 pound-feet of torque going to just the front wheels. Yeah, it sounds a little suspect. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of torque steer at full load, but I mean, it's kind of fun. It's not like you're doing front-wheel drive burnouts anytime you go near the throttle though. The Kona comes with what Hyundai calls their corner carving N differential. It's an LSD on the front, and it actually does a very good job keeping power getting to the ground. It also helps that you have Pirelli P0 tires with loads and loads of grip, and you do have an adaptive damper set, so it keeps the chassis really neutral, and it keeps power getting to the pavement. None of the torque is really wasted, and that's really nice, although I will say that's all relative to the SUV body. The Elantra N does do a bit better job of keeping the chassis neutral and feeling a little bit more organic through a corner. What I wasn't expecting was the amount of stiffness and cabin noise when you're just cruising. The Kona does very well when you're leaning on it, but that comes at a cost of a stiffer ride. And it's sharp and light feeling because they haven't layered in a bunch of sound deadening. But if you wanted a Kona that was soft and cushy, you wouldn't have gone with the N. There's an N line, there's a normal Kona, and there's even an electric Kona. So yes, the N is stiff and it's loud, but you bought it because you wanted the high performance one, and it is. This thing really starts at $34,200. It only comes in one trim, and it only comes with the DSG transmission. So the only option that you can get is a choice of one of the 4 paint colors. And 2, I believe it's the Supersonic Blue and the Championship, well, not Championship White, that's the Civic one, but the white are $400. So topped out, this thing is under 35 grand, $34,600 totally topped out. And that's a lot of car for that little bit of money. And I mean, speaking of the way that it looks, I think it looks pretty cool. I mean, this totally murdered out black spec comes included. There's no extra charge, it's just $34,200. And you get like these really interesting separate running lights, you've got your projectors down here, you've got a really kind of cool satin finish front splitter on your end caps, and then you've got this N grille. It's very aggressive. I don't know what these are for, you know, I kind of leave them, but you know, whatever. And then you've got the red splitter down there. The only way to not get the red splitter at the bottom, along the side skirts and around your diffuser is of course to get the red paint. But, you know, anyway, coming around the side, the thing that I really like here is they haven't overdone it. And it's a very different theme than you would get from the Elantra N. The Elantra N is more jagged, it's more sharp, it's more geometric. This is a little bit more swooping and flowy, and it almost has more of a sense of elegance to it. I know it's kind of interesting to say about a sub $35,000 Hyundai performance car, but anyway, you've got body colored and gloss wheel arches. That's not something that you get on an SUV. You know, I personally kind of think this is more of a hatchback than an SUV, but that's just my opinion. And then down here, you get your 19-inch N wheels, you've got your N brakes. They look pretty cool. They're like a gunmetal kind of two-tone finish. And then down the side here, we do have the red side sill with the N stamped into the back. And then of course, black roof rails, black wing mirrors, black window tree, everything is all blacked out, and it comes standard, which is very cool. One thing that I will point out though is the fact that you have this really short wheelbase, and that kind of helps the car feel a little bit more darty, a little bit more light and playful perhaps behind the wheel. But you know, it translates to something that is still pretty usable. You have a lot of rear seat headroom, although the rear seats, and we'll get to that when we go to the interior actually. But around the back here, you have this kind of exaggerated spoiler here at the top, as well as your triangle wing up here. That's kind of similar to what we had on the Veloster N last year, so it's kind of nice to see that here. Of course, you've got your red running lights in the back, and then separately down here you have your reverse lights and your blinkers. So that's lower down, kind of just above your diffuser and your dual exhaust, which again is rimmed in the red. So it is kind of nice. The black and red spec is kind of cliche. We test a lot of sports cars that are black and red spec, but I think it looks pretty nice. It's pulled off well with this Kona N. Let's step inside. And then on the interior of the Kona, it's not going to fool you into thinking that it's not a sub $35,000 Hyundai in here. But the stuff that you interact with most all the time, your steering wheel, your shift paddles, your steering wheel buttons, your shift lever, your handbrake, manual, very cool, as well as your seats, it's all in very nice materials. You've got this nice leather, you've got your blue stitching for your N brand, your shift knob is wrapped in perforated leather, it's very nice, same thing with your handbrake, and then your seat is a mixture of leather, pleather, and Alcantara, or some micro suede. It doesn't have the light up N like you would get in the Elantra N, but it does have blue stitching around its embossments, and it does have N stitched into the seat. So it is still nice, it just doesn't have that little extra bit of theater that's reserved for the Elantra N, and I think the Veloster. Actually don't know if they've killed off the Veloster. Someone will let me know down in the comments. But other than that, the design is, there's no other word to describe it, it's black. Everything is black, that's the only way you can get it. But it's fine. I think they do a decent job of differing the textures to give it a more of a sense of you're getting something new or different. One thing that is interesting though, in the Elantra N, you cannot get a sunroof in the manual equipped cars, but you can get a sunroof in the DCT cars. This Kona N only comes with a DCT, but no sunroof at all. So that is a little bit interesting. Now, when we start to talk about stuff like the technology, we have Hyundai's head unit and infotainment system. We've reviewed this a bunch of times on the channel. I'll just say this, it's very good. It is wired Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. So not quite as advanced, but again, you're paying not as much money for something like this. But all the systems here are very good. You've got your quiet mode and your sounds of nature and all the fun Hyundai stuff that you get. You also do get a totally digital gauge cluster in here, and it totally changes when you go into N mode. It gives it like a fire thing that goes around your tack. It's kind of fun. There's a sense of levity in this car, and I really appreciate that, to bring some sense of personality. And then on your steering wheel, you do have your two N buttons. The N on the left-hand side is hollow, and the N on the right-hand side is filled in. So if you press each one once and you're not in N mode, it'll default to N mode, and then it'll go into custom 1 or custom 2 on the left or right respectively if you hit the button again. And then importantly, underneath on the right-hand side is the red NGS button. And we talked about this behind the wheel. I'll give you that 20 seconds of overboost. So it's a really, really nice system. The shift paddles are pretty nice. They are plastic. It'd be kind of, I guess, cooler if they were aluminum, but whatever. But back over under your center stack here, you of course have physical controls for your climate buttons, which is fantastic. I really like that. You do have wireless charging down here, which in my experience has worked very well. You've got your drive mode selector knob. You've got 3-level heated seats, no cooled seats, obviously. And then of course you got your traction button. We talked about the manual handbrake, dual cup holders. They're not big enough for my emotional support water bottle, but nothing is. And then you've got a small center console in here. Of course, you've got glove box and a couple door cards for some additional storage. But ultimately, behind the wheel here, it is pretty comfortable. I like the seats. They hug me pretty well at 6'1". And the back seats, that's where things start to... You're buying this because you're thinking that, okay, I'm going to get the SUV, I'm going to have a nice big practical vehicle. And it's true, you have a lot more cargo space, but in terms of rear seat legroom, I believe you actually have more room in the Elantra. So you have a little bit more headroom than you would in the Elantra in here, but in terms of rear seat legroom, myself at 6'1", I don't want to sit back there. But of course you can fold the seats down and have a pretty big and cavernous cargo space. Now that we've spent more time with the Kona N and know it a bit deeper, have our opinions changed? No, not really. In a market where every car gets bigger, heavier, and quieter, Every year they smooth some of the rough edges out and dial out the quirks. It's nice to know there's something out there that gives you all the personality you could ever want, and with some decent practicality to boot. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.